Good morning, everybody. I have 4 NBA player props for you guys to hammer for tonight's NBA betting slate. We got a pretty decent amount of games on tap for tonight, and I have 4 player props again for you guys to lock in, 3 of which are of the plus money banger variety. The 4th one, I had to sneak in an under. It's been a pretty hit or miss year so far for me since the beginning of the NBA season, admittedly. Every time I think I'm getting on a hot streak, I get cold. Every time I get a cold streak, I start to get hot. But things might be looking up as we have had 2 straight profitable days with these NBA picks. Last time you saw me on this YouTube channel, I gave out 4 picks. I got 3 of those 4 to cash, was 1 away from a 4-0 day, but we will take 3-1. We are up over 2 units last video alone. That brings our total results season to date for these NBA player props. We are up 4.75 units with an ROI of 5.16. Now, don't let the win-loss record fool you. I started off the season only giving out plus 300 plays and above, so obviously your win percentage is going to be lower. Since then, I've kind of mixed in some plus money bangers with some regular main lines, so the win percentage evened out as the season went on. Obviously, the most important thing you want to look at is total profit and ROI. As I mentioned, for today, we got 4 more picks for you guys to lock in. Before we get into those, would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel. And let's get into these picks. So play number 1 is in the Heat versus Bulls game. We're taking Jimmy Butler under 23.5 points, minus 110 odds at DraftKings. So it's my only fade, my only underplay of the day. But I do like Jimmy to go under in this one. Now, I'm going to get out what you want to say first, right? Your rebuttal, here's what you're going to want to say. He just went over against the Bulls, and he's been playing well recently. But for those of you that know me and my betting strategy, I'm fading that. We call him playoff Jimmy. We all know that there's a difference between playoff Jimmy and regular season Jimmy. It's just a different animal. And when you look at his season as a whole, he didn't go over this number in the first 5 games, and he went under in the first 7 of 8 games this year. So he literally only went over once in the first 8 games. Well, as the NBA season goes, there was a downswing, then he had an upswing. Now it was bound for Jimmy to bounce back after that slow start, so it's only natural for things to start swinging back the other way. He's gone over this number the past 3 games after only going over once in the first 8. But that's just how the NBA season goes. There are ebbs, there are flows. You kind of have to just ride the wave. And I do think that there are reasons to believe that tonight will be an underplay for Jimmy Butler. Again, I know he just went over against the Bulls, but if you just look at the raw stats and take out the last matchup, as much of a joke as the Bulls have been this year, and everybody loves clowning them, including myself, their defense isn't horrible. According to net rating, they have the 13th ranked defense according to net rating. I'm not sitting here telling you that they are great, but they're definitely not a horrible defense either. But because they play at a slow pace, and we'll get into that, in terms of scoring, they're actually they're a better defense, I should say. They allow 110.5 points per game. That is the 8th lowest points per game allowed in the NBA. The reason why they allow such a low amount of points compared to their defensive net rating is because of the pace they play at. They play very slow, at the 3rd slowest pace in the NBA. Now the Heat, they also play at a slow pace, not as slow as the Bulls, but they play at the 9th slowest pace. So 2 bottom 10 teams in terms of pace. That just limits possessions, that limits overall scoring. And just because Jimmy Butler went over last game and he's been on a little bit of a heater recently, doesn't scare me off and make me think that he's going to consistently go over his point total over under. So I like fading Jimmy Butler in this one, under 23.5 points as our first play. Next up, Bucks versus Wizards. We're taking Damian Lillard, 30 plus points, plus 125 odds at FanDuel. Okay, now we are getting to the pumped up props, starting with Dame. Now, it's been a weird year for the Bucks, and it's been a weird year for Dame specifically as well, but they're starting to get it together, not necessarily defensively, but at least the partnership specifically between Dame and Giannis. Now, Giannis has been cooking, right? He's been putting up 35 points pretty consistently, but for tonight, I like riding with Damian Lillard to get us to 30 plus. Now, he's gone 30 plus in 4 times so far this year. And for tonight, I like for him to go over. There's a couple reasons why. Number 1, the matchup, the Wizards, total abomination, horrible team. 2nd worst net rating in the NBA, second worst defensive net rating in the NBA, allowing 122.9 points per game, which is 3rd worst. Both of these teams play at a fast pace. Now, of course, there is blowout potential. Always when you play the Wizards, there is blowout potential, but Dame should be able to have a ton of success against the Wizards in this one. Giannis could too. I'm not gonna say that it's going to be Dame over Giannis. Both of them could blow up, but Giannis, his point total is higher, and to get him to go to 35 plus, it's not just quite as juicy as a Damian Lillard price. As I mentioned, Dame has hit this 4 times on the year, but he has been playing better recently. At the beginning of the year, he started off the year 39 points. The next game, he had 6. He was very hit or miss. He's starting to play more consistently. He had 37 points 3 games ago, and then in the past 2, he's had exactly 27. So he's been getting close. That's a way more consistent. Granted, it's only a 3-game sample size, so it's still a small sample, but that 3-game stretch is more consistent than any other 3-game stretch he has had this year. So against the Wizards, against a horrible matchup, I think he gets going. I think he gets us to 30 plus points, cashing this play for us. Next up, in the Clippers versus Spurs game, James Harden, 10 plus assists, plus 290 odds at FanDuel. Now, this one is definitely the spiciest. It's the spiciest in terms of odds, and it's just the spiciest in terms of the general matchup and everything like that. Not necessarily the matchup with the Spurs, just with how the Clippers and James Harden has been playing. But tonight, there are reasons to believe that Harden will have his best game as a member of the Clippers. As a Clipper this year, he has yet to go above 7 assists on the year. And he just hit 7 last game, which was his season high. But that was against the Rockets, who somehow this year have really put it together defensively. The Rockets are not a great matchup for the opposing offense, whereas the Spurs could not be the total opposite. They could not be more different than the Rockets. I mentioned how bad the Wizards defense was. Well, the Spurs defense is even worse than the Wizards, and we'll get into that. But the reason why I'm targeting James Harden in this game, there's a tangible difference in last game when he had his best game as a member of the Clippers, and it was the first game that Russell Westbrook came off the bench. He who knows if he suggested it? That's what the reports say. It doesn't matter. Russ coming off the bench just makes the Clippers make a lot more sense as a team without another non-shooter on the floor. Just with the spacing and in general makes a lot more sense with Russ on the bench, not with Harden. And as much as I and everybody else loves to clown Harden, he did lead the league in assists last year. Now, this is a different team, a different situation, but all I'm trying to say here is that as he has been diminished as a scorer, his passing has still remained elite. It was that way on the Nets the year prior. So I mentioned that the Clippers are playing the Spurs. The Spurs give up the 4th most assists per game. The Spurs also play at the fourth fastest pace per game as well. They also have the worst defense according to net rating in the NBA. They're just a total abomination. The Clippers do play at a slow pace, but just because of the fact they're playing against the Spurs, they're going to have more possessions in general. And because they're playing against the Spurs, a lot of those possessions are probably going to come easy for them as well. As I mentioned, James Harden's over-under in this one is 7.5. He's yet to go over 7.5 on the year. The books know that. I always love situations like that where people are going to look at his over-under record. They're going to say he literally has not gone over this yet this year. We're going to hammer the under. My logic is always to fade that and do the opposite. He averaged over 10 assists last year. I think we see a great passing game from Harden tonight with his getting his wish with Russ on the bench, cashing plus 290 for us. Next up, our 4th and final pick of the evening, Anthony Edwards, 30 plus points, plus 230 odds at FanDuel. So another spicy one in terms of the odds and in terms of the fact that it's just fading recent events. Anthony Edwards had a really, really good start to the year. He blew up to start the year. It's been slower the past couple games. So he had 33 points against the Wizards against the Warriors 4 games ago. Since then, he has yet to go over 23 points. And when you coincide Anthony Edwards having a rougher stretch just in terms of raw scoring, well, that coincides with Karl Anthony Towns scoring a lot more. In the past 3 games, Karl Anthony Towns has scored 33, 25, and 29, going well over his point total over under the past 3 games, while Anthony Edwards has gone well under. In this game, my prediction is it swings back the other way. Eventually, Anthony Edwards is going to get going. He's too talented of a scorer to not. He puts up too many shots to not do that as well. And the thing is, even if you look at his 3-game stretch where he hasn't been scoring as much, he's still attempting a decent amount of shots, at least 16 in all 3 games. He just hasn't been shooting well. 3 games ago, he went 7 of 16 from the field. 2 games ago, he went 4 of 16. And last game, he went 9 of 19. Now, last game, if you just look at his field goal attempts and his 3-point attempts, those look pretty good. The biggest issue is he hasn't been getting to the line. He was living at the line earlier in the year, and he has a combined 9 free throw attempts the past 3 games. Keep in mind, the 2 games prior to this 3-game stretch, he had double-digit free throw attempts in each game. He literally had 10 and 11 free throw attempts. Since then, has had a combined 9 in 3 games. Now, I will admit the Knicks do have a very good defense, and they do play at a slow pace. But because it's the NBA, they still are capable of allowing big games. LaMelo Ball scored over 30 on them last game. Brandon Miller scored 29. That was on a 9.5 point over-under. So I think Anthony Edwards gets it going back tonight. Who doesn't want to show out against the Knicks? Even though it's not at the Mecca, it's in Minnesota. But still, I like for Anthony Edwards to have a good game tonight, hopefully getting us to 30-plus points as our 4th and final pick of the evening. If we get any semblance of 2 of these plays to hit, we will be profitable. I put 1 unit on each of them individually. I put a small amount on a parlay of all 4. Let's hope we can have another good day. 3 good days in a row would be nice. And that's all I got. So appreciate everybody for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and have a good one.